I ruined my relationship by confessing something I thought would bring us closer, and now everyone thinks I'm a monster for being honest about faking orgasms for 3 years. What they don't understand is that the lie wasn't the worst part of what I did. My friends say I destroyed a good man over nothing. My sister won't speak to me. Even my therapist looked uncomfortable when I explained what happened. They all think this is about sexual dishonesty, about hurting his ego, about my inability to communicate. But there's so much more they don't know, things I haven't told anyone until now. I'm going to explain everything, including the real reason I confessed, what I was actually trying to hide, and the truth about what happened during those 3 years that makes this so much worse than anyone realizes. By the end, you'll understand why he didn't just leave. He completely erased me from his life like I never existed. It started innocently enough. When I met Daniel, I was 26 and convinced I was broken somehow. Not in any dramatic way. I'd had relationships before, enjoyed sex, felt attracted to people. But I'd also spent years performing, making the right sounds, moving the right ways, because that's what kept boyfriends happy and relationships intact. It seemed easier than the alternative: long conversations, hurt feelings, guys becoming distant or angry when their efforts didn't produce the expected results. Daniel was different from my exes in ways that mattered to me then. He had a stable job in accounting, owned his apartment, called his mother every Sunday. He was kind, predictable, safe. Our first time together was fine, enthusiastic on his part, adequately pleasant on mine. When I mimicked the responses I'd perfected over the years, his face lit up with such genuine pride and affection that something in my chest tightened. He held me afterward and whispered, "I've never felt this connected to someone." I told myself it was a small thing, maintaining this performance. Relationships required compromise, didn't they? And he was so happy, so confident in our compatibility. Why ruin something good over something so minor? I convinced myself that maybe the intensity would develop naturally over time, that my body would eventually catch up to my acting. The first red flag appeared 3 months in, though I didn't recognize it then. Daniel started researching techniques, reading articles, asking questions about my preferences. He was so earnest, so determined to be a good partner. Each conversation required more elaborate lies from me, more specific feedback based on my fabricated experiences with him. I created an entire false map of my pleasure, directing him toward things that I claimed drove me wild but actually did very little. "You're so responsive," he told me one night, his eyes shining with accomplishment. "I love that we have this connection." That word again, connection. I smiled and kissed him, ignoring the small voice that whispered I was building something on a foundation of sand. The lie grew roots. 6 months became a year. I moved into his apartment because it made financial sense, and because he seemed so certain we were heading toward marriage. His friends' girlfriends confided in me about their own relationship problems, and I gave advice while maintaining my facade as the woman in the perfectly compatible relationship. Daniel's mother told me I'd made her son happier than she'd ever seen him. I started believing my own performance. Or rather, I buried the truth so deep that I could almost forget it existed. We fell into comfortable routines: dinner at the same restaurants, sex on Tuesday and Saturday nights, Sunday brunches with his family. He never suspected anything was wrong because I never let the mask slip. I became an expert at reading his cues, knowing exactly when to gasp, when to grab his shoulders, when to whisper his name. But here's what I didn't realize I was doing: I was also controlling every intimate aspect of our relationship. By faking my responses, I was guiding him away from anything that required real vulnerability from me. I kept him focused on the physical performance while maintaining complete emotional distance. The lie wasn't just about protecting his feelings, it was about protecting myself from actual intimacy. Around the 18-month mark, Daniel started talking seriously about engagement rings. He showed me Pinterest boards, asked subtle questions about my preferences, talked about timelines. His sister was getting married that summer, and I could see him imagining our turn coming soon. That's when the panic started creeping in, not because I didn't love him, I did in my careful, controlled way, but because marriage felt permanent and I couldn't imagine maintaining this performance for another 40 years. The thought exhausted me. Still, I smiled and discussed diamond cuts while my internal dread grew. I began researching online. Anonymous forums, Reddit threads, articles about sexual compatibility and honesty in relationships. Everyone said the same thing: communication was essential. Honesty was the foundation of intimacy, lies eroded trust. I read story after story of women who'd come clean about faking, and while there was initial hurt, most relationships survived with better communication afterward. This is where I made my first calculating decision, though I told myself it was about honesty. I decided I would confess, but only partially. I would tell him I'd been faking sometimes, that I was nervous about disappointing him, that I wanted us to explore together. I'd frame it as a growth opportunity, a chance to deepen our connection. I practiced the conversation in my head, crafting it carefully to minimize damage while still appearing honest. I never planned to tell him it was 3 years. I never planned to tell him it was every single time. But I also didn't plan on what actually happened. The confession I'd rehearsed so carefully lived in my head for weeks before I gathered the courage to speak it aloud. Daniel and I were 2 years in at that point, and his sister's wedding was approaching. I'd been included in all the bridesmaid activities, had bonded with his family, had become woven into the fabric of his life. His mother had pulled me aside at a family dinner and shown me her grandmother's ring, mentioning that she hoped to see it on the right hand someday soon. The pressure was building from all sides, and I felt it compressing around my chest every time Daniel touched me with such confidence, such certainty that he knew my body perfectly. I chose a Saturday morning to have the conversation. We'd slept in, and sunlight filtered through the bedroom curtains. Daniel was in a good mood, making plans for the day. This was supposed to be the moment where I carefully revealed a partial truth, where I gently corrected course while maintaining the relationship's foundation. "I need to talk to you about something," I started, my rehearsed words ready. "About our intimacy." He sat up, immediately attentive and concerned. "Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong?" And that's when my carefully constructed plan fell apart. Because the genuine worry in his voice, the immediate assumption that he'd somehow failed me, triggered something I hadn't anticipated. Guilt crashed over me in a wave so intense I couldn't breathe. Not the manageable guilt I'd been living with, but something massive and suffocating. "I've been faking," I blurted out, abandoning my script entirely. "Not sometimes, all of it, since the beginning." The words hung in the air between us. I watched his face cycle through confusion, disbelief, hurt, and finally something worse, a complete shuddering of expression. "All of it," he repeated slowly. "For 2 years. Yes," my voice came out as a whisper. "Every time? Yes." He stood up from the bed, and I remember noticing absurdly that he was wearing the pajama pants I'd bought him for Christmas, the ones with little cartoon coffee cups that I'd thought were cute. He walked to the window, his back to me, and I could see his shoulders rising and falling with measured breaths. "Why are you telling me this now?" His voice was eerily calm. This was the moment. I could still salvage something if I framed it correctly, if I explained it was about wanting to improve our relationship, about choosing honesty, about loving him enough to be vulnerable. All the justifications I'd prepared were still available to me. But I was so deep in the panic of confession that I made my second catastrophic mistake. I told him the truth. "Because I can't do it anymore," I said. "I can't keep pretending for the rest of my life. I thought I could, but your mom showed me her grandmother's ring and I can't." I watched him process this. That I hadn't confessed out of respect for him, or desire to improve our relationship, or even guilt over deceiving him. I'd confessed because maintaining the lie had become inconvenient for me, because I was worried about my own future burden, not about the 2 years I'd already stolen from him. "So this isn't about wanting to fix things," he said, still not turning around. "This is about you not wanting to marry me." "No, that's not. I do want to be with you. I just want it to be real. I want us to actually, real." He laughed, a sound I'd never heard from him before, brittle and sharp. "You want real? After 2 years of performing every intimate moment we've shared, you've decided you'd like things to be real now. I know I should have told you sooner, but I was scared, and it just became harder and harder to. Did you ever actually want me?" He turned around finally, and his expression made me flinch. "Or was it all just, what, convenience, good enough? Of course I wanted you. I still want you. That's why I'm trying to fix this, trying to be honest. You're honest now because continuing the lie became too difficult. That's not the same thing." He grabbed his phone from the nightstand. "I need to go. I need to not be here right now." He left the apartment. I sat on the bed, simultaneously relieved that the secret was out and terrified about what came next. Part of me still believed this would blow over, that after he processed the initial shock, we could work through it. All the articles I'd read said couples survived this. We go to therapy, learn to communicate, rebuild with honesty. I didn't understand yet what I'd actually done. The full scope of it hadn't hit me. Daniel came back 3 hours later with his friend Marcus. They didn't speak to me. They went straight to the closet and started packing his clothes. I followed them, trying to explain, trying to salvage something, but Daniel moved through the apartment like I wasn't there. He was methodical, checking drawers, collecting his things, creating a pile by the door. "We can work through this," I kept saying. "We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. I love you." Marcus shot me a look that could have stripped paint. "You should stop talking." "This isn't your business," I snapped at him. "You made it everyone's business when you spent 2 years lying to my best friend about the most intimate part of your relationship." Marcus's voice was cold. "Let him pack in peace." Daniel didn't say a word during the entire process. Not when he disconnected his PlayStation, not when he took his books from the shelf, not when he removed the framed photo of us from the living room wall. His silence was worse than yelling would have been. "At least talk to me," I finally begged. "Yell at me, tell me you hate me, something." He paused with a box in his arms and looked at me directly for the first time since returning. What do you want me to say, Claire? That I forgive you? That will work it out. You didn't just lie about sex, you lied about who you were. Every time I thought we were sharing something real, you were acting. Every time I felt close to you, you were performing. You took 2 years of my life and made them fake. They weren't all fake. My feelings for you are real. Our relationship outside the bedroom is real. Is it? He set the box down. Because now I'm wondering what else was performance. When you said you loved me, was that real? When you cried at my grandfather's funeral, was that real? When you told me you wanted a future together, was that real? Or were you just saying what you thought you should say, like you were doing the things you thought you should do in bed? I had no answer, because he was right to question everything and we both knew it. I need you to understand something, he continued, his voice shaking slightly. You didn't just hurt my ego, you stole my agency. Every time we were intimate, I thought you were experiencing what I was experiencing. I thought we were sharing something, but you were tolerating it at best. And I never had the choice to decide if that was okay with me because you never told me the truth. You made decisions about our entire relationship without giving me any input. The accuracy of this cut deep. He'd articulated something I'd been avoiding, acknowledging that my deception wasn't just about protecting his feelings or avoiding confrontation. It was about control. By managing his perception of our intimacy, I'd controlled the entire relationship dynamic without his knowledge. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve another chance, but if you could just... There's more, isn't there? He was watching my face carefully now. You confessed because of my mom's ring, because you couldn't imagine keeping this up long term. But there's something else. I can see it in your face. My stomach dropped. He'd always been perceptive, but his trust in me had made him overlook the small inconsistencies. Now that trust was gone, he was seeing clearly for the first time. Tell me, he demanded. If we're being honest now, tell me everything. This was the moment. I could still hold back the worst part. He was already leaving, already hurt beyond repair. What difference would the additional truth make except to hurt him more? But I was so tired of lying. And some self-destructive part of me wanted him to know the full scope, wanted to be punished appropriately for what I'd done. I kept track, I heard myself say. In my journal, every time we were together, I'd write down what I'd faked, what techniques I'd used to convince you, how long it took, whether you seemed to believe it. Analyzed it like data. I was perfecting my performance. The color drained from his face. You documented it like some kind of experiment. Not like that, I was just trying to. Where is it, this journal? I pointed numbly to my nightstand drawer. He walked over and pulled it out, a leather-bound notebook I'd bought specifically for this purpose. He flipped through pages filled with my handwriting, dates, clinical descriptions of our intimate moments together reduced to performance notes. Jesus Christ, Marcus breathed, reading over his shoulder. Claire, what the fuck is wrong with you? Daniel read in silence for several minutes. I watched his jaw clench, his hands tighten on the pages. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet. You wrote that I was particularly easy to convince on his birthday because I was too excited to notice inconsistencies. You noted that I responded well to auditory feedback, so you increased vocal performance by 15%. His voice broke. You turned me into a science project. I didn't mean it like that. There's an entry here from 3 weeks ago. We went to that bed and breakfast for our anniversary and I thought, God, I told you it was the best weekend of my life. And you wrote, he swallowed hard. You wrote that you maintained consistency despite boredom and that you were concerned about sustainability of current performance levels. Daniel, please, my grandfather died 6 months ago, he continued, his voice hollow now. I was a mess. You held me, stayed with me through the funeral, made love to me that night when I needed to feel connected to someone. I told you it meant everything to me, and you wrote, he found the page. Grief sex required minimal performance. Subject was too emotional to notice quality of response. Convenient. The word subject hung in the air between us. I'd written it without thinking, a clinical term that revealed how I'd truly been thinking about him during our most intimate moments. I wasn't thinking of you that way, I tried desperately. The journal was just my way of processing. I didn't mean 2 years, he said quietly. You studied me for 2 years like I was something in a lab. You documented my grief, my joy, my vulnerability, all while calculating how to manipulate me more effectively. That's not what I was doing. Then what were you doing? He finally shouted, and I actually stepped back. Explain it to me, Claire. Explain how this was anything other than you treating me like an experiment. Explain how writing subject responded positively to increased enthusiasm about the night I told you I was falling in love with you could possibly be anything other than cruel. I couldn't. There was no explanation that made it better. The journal revealed the truth I'd been hiding even from myself, that I'd approached our entire relationship as something to manage and control rather than something to experience authentically. I'd been so detached that I'd literally treated him as a research subject. I do love you, I said weakly. That was always real. He closed the journal carefully and placed it back in the drawer. No, you don't. You might think you do, but you can't actually love someone you're studying. Love requires vulnerability, and you've never been vulnerable with me. You've been too busy orchestrating every interaction to keep yourself safe. He was right again. My carefully maintained performance hadn't just been about sex, it had been my way of keeping him at a distance while appearing intimate. As long as I was controlling the script, I never had to risk actual emotional exposure. Marcus had finished packing the last box. Daniel picked up his keys, and I realized this was really ending. Right now, without resolution or closure or any of the things the articles had promised. Wait, I grabbed his arm. Where are you going? This is your apartment, I should be the one to leave. He pulled his arm free. Keep it, I can't be here. Everything in this place reminds me of a relationship that never existed. It did exist. Just because I lied about one thing doesn't mean everything was fake. One thing. You lied about every intimate moment we shared for 2 years and documented your deception in writing. That's not one thing, that's who you are. That hit harder than anything else he'd said. Not what you did, but who you are. He wasn't just rejecting my actions, he was rejecting my fundamental character. Please don't go like this, I begged. At least let's talk more, let me explain properly, let me. There's nothing left to say, you explained plenty in that journal. He walked toward the door, Marcus following with boxes. I chased after them. Will you at least call me in a few days when you've had time to process? Daniel stopped at the threshold. No, I won't call, I won't text, I won't respond if you reach out. As of right now, you don't exist to me anymore. You can't mean that. I do, because that's what you did to me, isn't it? You erased the real me and replaced me with some character in your performance. So now I'm returning the favor. You're gone. The door closed behind them. I stood in the empty apartment, his apartment that he was abandoning because being here hurt too much, and listened to their footsteps retreat down the hallway. I told myself he'd cool down, that after the initial shock wore off, we'd at least be able to have a rational conversation. I gave him 3 days before I sent the first text. It didn't deliver, green bubble instead of blue. He'd blocked me. I tried calling. Blocked. I sent an email to his work address. It bounced back with an auto-reply that he'd added me to his spam filter. I tried Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, blocked on every platform. When I tried to create a fake account to reach him, I discovered he'd deleted all his social media entirely. His mother called me the next week. Not to yell, which somehow would have been better. She was kind but firm. Daniel asked me to reach out, she said. He wants you to know that if you continue trying to contact him, he'll pursue a restraining order. He's serious, Claire. Please respect his wishes. Can you at least tell him I'm sorry, that I know I was wrong, that I want to? He knows you're sorry, but sorry doesn't undo what you did. He needs to heal, and he can't do that with you in his life in any capacity. She paused. I'm disappointed in you. I thought you were different. I thought you loved my son. I did love him, I do. Then let him go. She hung up. I tried showing up at his office 2 weeks later. Security wouldn't let me up, and later I got a formal cease and desist letter from a lawyer. Daniel had actually hired legal representation to keep me away from him. Marcus posted something vague on social media about supporting friends through betrayal, and I got blocked by everyone in Daniel's friend group within 24 hours. People I'd considered my friends too, who'd been at my birthday party, who I'd gone to concerts with, just erased me. My own friends were divided. My best friend Jenna was sympathetic at first. I mean, obviously you fucked up massively, she said over wine at her apartment. But everyone makes mistakes. The journal thing was weird, sure, but you were obviously dealing with some issues around intimacy that you need to work through. I latched onto this interpretation desperately. Yes, I had issues. I could work on them. This was about my problems, not my character. But then she read the journal entries I'd stupidly shown her, trying to prove that it wasn't as bad as it sounded. Her face changed as she read. Claire, this is really disturbing. You wrote about him like he wasn't even human, like he was just this thing you were manipulating. I was trying to process complex feelings. No, she closed the journal. This isn't processing feelings. This is detachment, clinical, calculated detachment. Did you actually care about him at all? Of course I did, that's why I confessed. You confessed because keeping up the lie became inconvenient. You said so yourself. She stood up. I think you should go, I need to think about some things. We haven't spoken since. She didn't block me, but she stopped responding to messages. Just a slow fade, like I was being edited out of her life too. My sister Rachel was more direct. She called 3 weeks after the breakup, having heard the story from our mother, who'd heard it from me in a tearful phone call where I downplayed the worst parts. I talked to Daniel, she said without preamble. My heart stopped. What, how? We have mutual friends. I wanted to hear his side before I judged you. Her voice was cold. You want to tell me why you left out the part about the journal? About the fact that you studied him like a lab rat for 2 years? That's not, it wasn't like that. He showed me screenshots of the entries, Claire. I read what you wrote about his grandfather's funeral. What the fuck is wrong with you? I know it sounds bad, but I was trying to what? There's no explanation that makes this okay. You're my sister and I love you, but what you did is genuinely sociopathic. You need professional help. Don't call me that. Then what should I call someone who treats another human being like an experiment? Who documents their emotional manipulation in writing? Who fakes intimacy for 2 years and keeps detailed notes on their performance? I had no answer, she sighed. I can't do this right now, I can't look at you the same way. Maybe eventually after you've gotten serious help, but right now I need distance. Another person gone, my own sister. The apartment became a prison. Daniel's landlord contacted me about the lease. It was in Daniel's name and he'd stopped paying. Did I want to take it over or vacate? I couldn't afford it alone, so I had to move. Packing up the space we'd shared, I found small reminders of him everywhere. A coffee mug with an accounting joke, his favorite hot sauce in the fridge, a sweatshirt he'd forgotten still smelling like his detergent. I tried therapy. My therapist listened to the whole story, including the journal, and her professional neutrality slipped just enough for me to see her discomfort. What you're describing suggests significant issues with intimacy avoidance and emotional regulation, she said carefully. The journaling in particular indicates a level of dissociation from the relationship that's concerning. You were protecting yourself from vulnerability by treating the entire relationship as something you could study and control. So it's a defense mechanism. That's treatable, right? It's a pattern that can be addressed, yes. But Claire, you also need to reckon with the harm you caused. This isn't just about fixing yourself for future relationships. You hurt someone badly. The work isn't just about understanding why you did it, it's about developing genuine empathy for the impact. I do feel terrible about it. Feeling terrible isn't the same as empathy. You feel bad because you're experiencing consequences. But do you understand what it was like for him? To discover that someone he trusted completely had been performing intimacy while documenting his responses like data points. I tried to imagine it, really tried. Daniel reading my clinical descriptions of moments he thought were genuine connection. The humiliation, the betrayal, the fundamental violation of discovering that someone had been studying you when you thought they were loving you. It would destroy me, I admitted quietly. Yes, she agreed. And that's what you did to him. The full weight of it finally crashed down. I'd been so focused on my own guilt, my own loss, my own reputation damage that I hadn't fully absorbed what I'd done to another person. I'd violated his trust in the most intimate way possible, then documented that violation in writing. And when confronted, my first instinct had been to minimize and justify rather than take real accountability. I stopped trying to contact him after that. Not because of the legal threats, but because I finally understood that reaching out was just another form of making it about me. He'd asked for complete removal from my life, and the only decent thing I could do was honor that. But the consequences kept spreading. Daniel's sister's wedding happened, and I'd been uninvited, obviously. But I heard from a former mutual friend that Daniel brought a date. Someone he'd apparently started seeing almost immediately after we broke up. The jealousy that information triggered revealed another ugly truth about myself. I was more upset about him moving on than about the pain I'd caused him. My therapist had a field day with that revelation. You're grieving the loss of control, she said, not the relationship itself. You're upset that he's living his life without you in it, that he's recovered faster than you expected, that you can't manage the narrative anymore. She was right, again. Everyone kept being right about me, and it was excruciating. I started working through the real issues in therapy. The intimacy avoidance, the control problems, the tendency to treat relationships as performances rather than authentic connections. It turned out I'd been doing versions of this my whole life, not to the extreme of the journal, but the pattern was there. Keeping people at arm's length while appearing close. Managing perceptions. Maintaining careful control over how much of myself I revealed. The journal had just been the most explicit manifestation of a lifelong pattern. My therapist suggested I write a real apology letter to Daniel, not to send, but as an exercise in accountability. I spent weeks on it, trying to articulate genuine understanding of what I'd done without making excuses or centering my own feelings. The letter helped me see that I'd robbed him of something fundamental, the ability to make informed choices about his own relationship. Every time we'd been intimate, he'd believed we were sharing mutual pleasure. He'd made decisions about our future based on false information. He trusted me with his vulnerability while I was keeping clinical distance. I treated his consent as something I could manipulate rather than something I needed to earn honestly. That realization made me physically ill. I thought of myself as someone who told a lie, made a mistake, handled things badly. But it was worse than that. I'd systematically deceived someone about the fundamental nature of our relationship, documented that deception, and only confessed when maintaining the lie became inconvenient for me. 6 months after the breakup, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop. He saw me and his face hardened, but he didn't leave. I approached his table carefully. I'm not going to bother you, I said. I just wanted to say that I know what I did was inexcusable. I'm working on it in therapy, but I understand if that means nothing to you, I'm sorry. He studied me for a long moment. Are you apologizing because you want me to tell Daniel or because you actually mean it? I mean it, I don't expect forgiveness, I just wanted you to know. He's doing better, Marcus said finally. In case you were wondering, the woman he's seeing treats him like he's worth genuine honesty. It's nice to see him with someone who doesn't think of him as a test subject. The words stung, but I deserved them. I'm glad, really, he deserves that. Marcus nodded slowly. You know what the worst part was for him? Not the sexual stuff, not even the journal. It was that he couldn't trust his own judgment anymore. If he'd missed something that fundamental for 2 years, what else was he missing? He questioned every relationship, every interaction. You didn't just hurt him, you made him doubt his ability to perceive reality correctly. I hadn't thought of that consequence, that my deception had damaged not just our relationship but his confidence in his own perceptions. Another layer of harm I'd caused. I didn't realize. No, you didn't, because you were too busy managing your performance to think about the long-term consequences of what you were doing. He stood up. Get help, Claire, real help, because what you did wasn't just dishonest, it was cruel in a way you still don't fully understand. He left and I sat alone with my coffee, trying to absorb what he'd said. Cruel, not just wrong or hurtful, but cruel. The intentional, systematic nature of what I'd done qualified as cruelty, even if I hadn't consciously intended harm. A year later, I'm still in therapy, still working through the patterns that led me to treat someone I claimed to love like an object to be studied and controlled. I've started dating again, nothing serious, but I'm practicing actual honesty in small ways. Admitting when something doesn't work for me, being vulnerable even when it's uncomfortable, resisting the urge to perform. It's terrifying. Genuine intimacy requires giving up control, accepting that someone might see you fully and choose to leave anyway. That's the risk I'd spent my whole life avoiding, and it's the risk I have to learn to take if I ever want a real connection with anyone. I heard through the grapevine that Daniel got engaged to the woman he started dating after me. Part of me still feels that selfish sting of jealousy, wishes I could know if he ever thinks about me, if he's told her what I did. But mostly I hope he's happy. I hope he's built something real with someone capable of meeting him with actual authenticity. I'm telling this story now because I saw a post online, one of those relationship confessions where a woman admitted to faking it sometimes and everyone rallied around her with communication is key. And work on it together. Advice. I almost commented my story as a warning, but couldn't figure out how to condense the scope of what I'd done into a Reddit comment. So I'm writing it out here in full, because I need people to understand the difference between occasionally faking pleasure out of anxiety and what I did. What I did was systematic deception with documented evidence of my manipulation. What I did was treat another person's trust and vulnerability as raw material for my performance art. What I did was steal 2 years of someone's life while keeping detailed notes on my theft. I don't know if I'm a bad person fundamentally, or if I'm a person who did something unforgivably bad. My therapist says there's a difference, that people can change, that recognizing the harm is the first step toward being different. I'm trying to believe her. But I also know that Daniel was right to block me everywhere and erase me completely from his life. I know that my friends and sister were right to distance themselves. I know that the consequences I've faced are proportionate to what I did, maybe even less than I deserved. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd been honest from the start. If after our first time together I'd said, "That was nice, but I didn't quite get there. Can we try some other things?" Maybe we would have built actual compatibility. Maybe we would have discovered we weren't right for each other and parted ways amicably. Maybe he would have appreciated the honesty, and we would have developed real intimacy based on truth. I'll never know, because I chose control over vulnerability, performance over authenticity, deception over trust. And I documented that choice meticulously in a journal that stands as evidence of just how far I was willing to go to avoid genuine connection. So here it is, my confession in full. Not the version I told my friends or my mother or my first therapist. The complete truth about what I did, and why I did it, and what it cost everyone involved. I destroyed a good relationship and hurt a good man because I was too afraid of real intimacy to be honest. I kept a journal documenting my manipulation because I completely dissociated from the relationship, treating it as something to manage rather than experience. And I confessed not out of love or respect, but because maintaining the lie had become inconvenient for my future plans. Judge me however you want. I'm still learning to judge myself accurately, to sit with the discomfort of knowing what I'm capable of doing to another person when I'm protecting myself from vulnerability. That discomfort is probably permanent, and it should be. It's the weight I carry for choosing safety over honesty, control over connection, performance over truth. Daniel packed his stuff and blocked me everywhere, and I deserve every bit of that erasure. The real question I'm still grappling with is whether I can become someone who deserves better in the future, or whether this is just who I am, someone who studies people instead of loving them, who documents instead of experiencing, who performs instead of feeling. I don't have that answer yet. But at least now I'm asking the question honestly, without taking notes on how it makes me look.